The warning lights flashed red across the command center of Confederation Station Alpha. Kang Dai-ho stared at the holographic display showing 17 star systems painted in angry crimson. Each red dot meant another world lost to the swarm. Each dot represented billions of lives that had vanished in the past 3 months. "Sir, we're receiving another distress call from the Kepler sector," Park So-min said from her communication station. Her voice carried the exhaustion that everyone felt these days. "The Silnari crystal cities on Brightholme are under attack." Daeho closed his eyes for a moment. Brightholme was beautiful. He had visited there once during the peace negotiations 2 years ago. The Silnari had built their cities from living crystal that sang in harmony with the planet's magnetic field. Now those same crystals would be ground to dust to feed the endless hunger of the Vextar swarm. "Send the evacuation protocols," he ordered. "Tell them to abandon the surface cities and head for the deep space stations." "Already done, sir. But their ships are too slow. The swarm will catch them before they reach the jump points." Across the command center, other officers worked frantically at their stations. Yoon Tae-sung bent over his xenobiology console, trying to find some weakness in the swarm's biological structure. Charts and data streams covered every screen around him, but his face showed only frustration. "Anything new on their biology?" Daeho asked, walking over to the science station. Tae-sung shook his head. "They adapt too quickly. Every time we think we found something, they change. Their biomechanical ships grow new armor in hours. Their soldier forms evolve new weapons between battles. It's like fighting an enemy that learns from every attack." The Vextar swarm had appeared from the galactic rim 6 months ago. At first, the Confederation thought they were just another species seeking new worlds. The galaxy was big enough for everyone, they believed. Peace talks were attempted. Diplomatic messages were sent. The swarm's response came in the form of consumed worlds. They didn't just conquer planets. They ate them, stripped away the atmosphere, dissolved the oceans, and broke down the very rock to feed their growing fleets. Behind them, they left empty husks floating in space where living worlds once thrived. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Voltem delegation," So-min announced. The main screen flickered to life, showing Ambassador Veltar floating in his atmospheric suit. The gaseous Voltem looked more transparent than usual, a sign of extreme stress among his people. "Kang Dae-ho," the ambassador's translated voice carried desperation. "Our home system falls within days. 3 of our gas giant nurseries are already consumed. We beg again for military assistance from any who will listen." "I understand, Ambassador. We've sent requests to every military power in the galaxy. The Kavashi Empire, the hegemony, the trade worlds, everyone. And their responses?" Daeho's jaw tightened. "They say the Confederation chose the path of peace. They say this is the price of refusing to build weapons or train soldiers. They will not risk their fleets for worlds that cannot defend themselves." The ambassador's form flickered with anger. "So we die because we chose not to become killers?" Before Daeho could answer, another alarm sounded. Lieutenant Commander Kim Jun-ho rushed over from the tactical station, his face pale. "Sir, we just lost contact with the Morden Forest worlds. All 7 colonies went dark at the same time. 7 worlds. The beautiful garden planets where the plant-like Morden cultivated their living cities among the trees. Gone in an instant." Daeho felt something cold settle in his stomach. The swarm was accelerating its attacks. "How long before they reach the core worlds?" he asked quietly. Jun-ho checked his calculations. "At their current speed, maybe 2 weeks. The industrial worlds of New Geneva will be first, then Earth's colonies. Then Earth itself." The command center fell silent. Earth. The world that had only joined the Confederation 5 years ago. The world that most species still whispered about in frightened tones. The Death World. Class 12 environmental hazard. Home to creatures so violent and adaptable that most civilized beings couldn't believe they had achieved spaceflight. "Sir," So-min said carefully, "we could send a message to Earth, request assistance." Daeho looked around the command center. Every face showed the same desperate hope mixed with fear. They all knew the stories about humans. How they came from a world where everything tried to kill them. How they had survived ice ages, plagues, and global wars. How they still practiced something called combat sports for entertainment. "The humans are new to the Confederation," Tae-sung said slowly. "They might not understand what they're agreeing to. Or they might be our only hope," Jun-ho added. Ambassador Veltar's voice came through the speakers again. "What other choice do we have?" The civilized galaxy abandons us. Perhaps it takes uncivilized beings to fight uncivilized monsters. Deho walked to the main console and placed his hand on the communication controls. Earth was 3 days away by fastest courier ship. The human government would need time to discuss, to debate, to decide. By the time they responded, more worlds would be dead. But what choice did they have? Somin, open a priority channel to Earth, he ordered. Full diplomatic encryption. Mark it as a request for military assistance under the Mutual Defense Clause. Sir, should I mention the nature of the enemy? Tell them everything. The size of the swarm, their adaptive capabilities, their consumption of entire worlds. Don't hide anything. As Somin worked at her station, Deho stared at the tactical display. Red dots spreading across the galaxy like a disease. Behind each dot, empty space where civilizations once flourished. The swarm grew stronger with every world it consumed, building new ships from the very matter of destroyed planets. Message sent, sir, Somin reported. Estimated delivery time, 72 hours. Now we wait, Deho said. What if they say no? Junho asked quietly. What if they decide we're not worth the risk? Deho didn't answer immediately. He thought about the human ambassador he had met during the peace negotiations. Strange beings, the humans. They smiled with their teeth showing, which most species found threatening. They looked directly into your eyes when speaking, a behavior considered aggressive by civilized standards. They moved with a controlled violence that made even experienced diplomats nervous. But they had also shown unexpected kindness. Human medical teams had helped during the Rigel Plague. Human engineers had shared their technology freely. They seemed to genuinely want peace, even if they carried themselves like warriors. I don't know, he finally admitted. I don't understand humans well enough to predict their response. On the screen, Ambassador Veltar's form began to fade. His people were retreating to their deep space installations, abandoning their home system to the approaching swarm. For what it's worth, the Voltem said, I hope the humans are as dangerous as everyone says they are. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in tense silence. Outside the station's windows, refugee ships streamed past carrying the survivors of consumed worlds. Millions of beings fleeing their homes, hoping to find safety somewhere in the shrinking free space of the galaxy. Deho returned to his command chair and stared at the tactical display. Somewhere out there, the Vextar swarm continued its relentless advance. Somewhere else, hopefully, humanity was reading their message and deciding whether to help. The galaxy held its breath and waited for Earth's Deathworlders to answer. Admiral Lee Hyunwoo stood in the war room beneath Seoul, surrounded by holographic displays showing the galaxy. Red markers indicated swarm positions. Blue showed Confederation worlds still holding out. The room buzzed with activity as Earth's military leaders absorbed the reality of what they faced. 18 billion dead in 3 months. General Kim Ji-won read from her tactical pad. 17 star systems completely consumed. Biomechanical ships that adapt to any weapon used against them. She looked up at the assembled officers. They want us to fight this? The Confederation formally requested military assistance under the Mutual Defense Clause, replied Foreign Secretary Park Dong-min via video link from the surface. We signed that treaty 5 years ago. Commander Choi Min-ho of the Marine Corps leaned forward in his chair. With respect, sir, we signed that thinking we'd help with pirates or maybe a trade dispute, not a galaxy-eating monster. Around the table, Earth's military leadership studied the data streams flowing in from Confederation space. Captain Young Hee-jin pulled up biological scans of swarm creatures on her display. The images showed nightmare forms of living metal and evolved flesh twisted into weapons. These things are big, she said, rotating a 3D model of a swarm soldier. 3 meters tall acid blood, redundant organ systems, built-in energy weapons. And they grow new abilities between fights. Sounds like fun, muttered Sergeant Major Yoon Taemin from the back of the room. Several officers chuckled, which made the Confederation observers on the communication link visibly nervous. Ambassador Kang Daeho's image flickered on the main screen as he tried to understand human reactions. Admiral Lee, the ambassador said carefully, I must stress the seriousness of this threat. The swarm has defeated every military force sent against it. The Kavashi Empire lost 3 full fleets. The hegemony's war machines were consumed and turned against their makers. We understand, Ambassador, Lee replied. How long do we have? The swarm will reach Earth's colonies within 10 days. Earth itself within 2 weeks. Lee turned to his staff. Fleet status? Third Fleet is completing exercises near Jupiter, reported Admiral Oda Young. Fifth and Seventh Fleets are in Earth orbit. We can have the entire Home Defense Force ready to move in 48 hours. Industrial capacity? General Han Sujin consulted her datapad. All orbital shipyards are currently building civilian vessels. We can convert to military production within 6 hours. The Luna factories can triple munitions output in 48 hours. Lee nodded. Around the table, officers were already making notes and sending orders to their subordinates. The alien ambassador watched this rapid mobilization with growing confusion. Admiral, Kang Dae-ho said, "You speak as if this is routine. Do you understand what you face? The swarm adapts to every tactic used against it. They learn from every battle." Captain Bae Sung-ho looked up from his tactical display. "So they're smart. Good. Fighting stupid enemies gets boring." More laughter from the human officers. On screen, the Confederation command staff exchanged worried glances. Dr. Song Hee-young, Earth's chief xenobiologist, studied the swarm data with obvious interest. "These adaptation rates are impressive. Genetic restructuring in hours instead of generations. But look at this neural structure." She highlighted sections of the biological scans. "They're optimized for hive coordination, not individual problem solving." "Meaning?" asked Lee. "They adapt as a collective, but slowly to completely new threats. If we can present them with something outside their experience, we kill them while they're still figuring us out," finished Commander Shin Yujin. Lee stood and walked to the main display. The galaxy stretched before him, red infection spreading across the stars. Behind those red markers were empty worlds, consumed civilizations, billions of dead. "Gentlemen, ladies," he said quietly, "we have a pest control problem." The room fell silent. Then Sergeant Major Yoon spoke up from the back. "Sir, what kind of rules of engagement are we looking at?" "What do you mean? Are we trying to capture specimens? Negotiate? Or is this extermination?" Lee looked at the alien faces on the communication screen. They showed confusion at the question. To them there was only one goal: survival. "The swarm consumes entire civilizations," Lee said. "They don't negotiate. They don't surrender. They eat planets." He turned back to his officers. "No rules, no limits. Complete extermination." Around the table, human faces showed grim satisfaction. These were the descendants of apex predators, evolved on a world where everything was dangerous. Their ancestors had survived ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, and each other. Now they face something that might actually be a challenge. "Fleet orders," Lee continued. "All civilian shipping is hereby commandeered for military support. Convert the cargo haulers to troop transports. The mining ships become supply vessels. Every orbital platform starts producing ammunition." "What about the Titan shipyards?" asked Admiral O. "Full conversion to military production. I want those new dreadnought designs ready in 72 hours. General Kim spoke up. "Ground forces? Every Marine unit, every Army division, every Special Forces team. Full mobilization. If we have to board those bioships, I want our people ready." Captain Young nodded. "What about civilian evacuations?" Lee smiled, and the alien observers flinched at the expression. "There won't be any. We're not running." On the communication link, Ambassador Kang Dae-ho looked stunned. "Admiral, perhaps you don't understand. The swarm has never been stopped. Every species that faced them directly was destroyed." "Maybe," Lee replied, "but they've never faced a species from a Class 12 death world before." The preparations began immediately. Across Earth and its colonies, humanity transformed itself into a war machine with terrifying efficiency. Civilian factories retooled for weapons production. Merchant ships were fitted with armor and guns. Every military base became a training ground for the coming fight. In the orbital shipyards above Earth, new vessels took shape. These weren't the elegant ships favored by most galactic civilizations. They were brutal, functional weapons designed by beings who understood that sometimes survival meant being better killers than the other side. Captain Lim Dong-hyun reported to Admiral Lee 3 days later. "First response fleet is ready, sir. 12 heavy cruisers, 18 destroyers, 4 assault carriers loaded with Marines. Time to target: 6 days to reach the nearest swarm incursion." Lee studied the tactical displays one more time. Across the galaxy, the Confederation retreated in panic. The civilized species fled before an enemy they couldn't understand or defeat. But humanity had spent millions of years learning a simple truth. Sometimes the only response to a monster was to become a better monster. "Signal the fleet," Lee ordered. "All ships make ready for immediate departure." and send a message to the Confederation. What should it say, sir? Lee looked at the red markers spreading across the galaxy and smiled again. That same expression that made peaceful aliens nervous. Tell them the exterminators are on the way. The refugee fleet limped toward the jump point, overloaded ships struggling to carry the survivors of Nemtar. Commander Bei Sung-ho watched the tactical display with growing desperation. Behind them, the Vextar swarm closed the distance with terrifying efficiency. 14 minutes to intercept, reported his tactical officer. The civilian ships can't reach the jump point in time. 3 million beings packed into cargo holds and passenger compartments that should have carried thousands. Families torn from their farms as the swarm consumed the agricultural world of Nemtar. Now they fled through space with nowhere to go. Any word from the reinforcement fleet? Bei asked. Still 20 minutes out, sir. The human ships are pushing their engines past safe limits, but they won't arrive in time. On the display, swarm bioships emerged from behind Nemtar's burning moon, living vessels the size of cities. Their hulls pulsing with organic energy conduits, scout forms spread out like metallic insects, each one capable of tearing apart a corvette. Bei had seen the combat reports. Every species that fought the swarm directly was destroyed. The smart play was to run, to preserve what ships they could for the next evacuation. Losing his small defense force would save no one, but 3 million civilians couldn't run fast enough. All ships combat formation, he ordered. Prepare to engage. His officers exchanged glances. They all knew how this would end. The Confederation's light cruisers and destroyers carried weapons designed for police actions, not war. Against the swarm's biomechanical nightmares, they might buy the refugees 10 minutes. It would have to be enough. Swarm ships are changing formation, the tactical officer reported. They're spreading out to surround the refugee fleet. Of course they are, Bei muttered. The swarm hunted like pack predators, cutting off escape routes before closing in for the kill. Standard behavior that every species in the galaxy had learned to fear. Alarms suddenly sounded across the bridge. New contacts appeared on the display, dropping out of hyperspace directly between the Confederation fleet and the approaching swarm. What in the void? Someone whispered. The human ships looked wrong. Where galactic civilizations built elegant vessels with smooth curves and gleaming hulls, these were angular blocks of metal bristling with weapons. They moved like predators turning toward the swarm with obvious hostile intent. This is Admiral Lee Hyunwoo of the Earth Defense Force, came the transmission. Confederation vessels, please stand clear. We're about to engage the enemy. Admiral, Bei replied quickly. The swarm adapts to any weapon used against it. They learn from every attack. You should coordinate with our tactical data before engaging. Appreciated, Commander, but we have our own approach. The human fleet accelerated toward the swarm formation. Bei watched in horror as the Earth ships charged directly at enemies that had destroyed every military force sent against them. This wasn't tactics. This was suicide. Human fleet, recommend you maintain distance and use long-range weapons, he transmitted urgently. Close engagement with swarm forces results in total casualties. Copy that, Commander. Thanks for the warning. The humans kept accelerating. Captain Oda Young stood on the bridge of the heavy cruiser Seoul, watching the swarm bioships grow larger on the display. Around her, the crew worked with calm efficiency that would have seemed insane to any civilized observer. Range to target? She asked. 30,000 kilometers in closing, reported Lieutenant Commander Kim Taemin. Enemy vessels are beginning to adapt their formation. Good. Let them think. The swarm ships moved with fluid grace, their living hulls rippling as internal organs shifted to present the strongest armor toward the approaching humans. Gunports opened along their sides, revealing biomechanical weapons that had shattered the fleets of a dozen civilizations. All ships, this is Admiral Lee, came the fleet communication. Remember, we're not here to impress anyone. We're here to solve a problem. Oh smiled. Around her, the bridge crew showed the same expression. They had trained for this scenario during the war games on Europa. Enemy forces with unknown capabilities. Hostile environment. No backup. Just another day at the office. Range 15,000 kilometers, Taemin reported. Swarm vessels are powering weapons. Signal the fleet. O ordered. All ships execute Protocol 7. The human formation suddenly split apart. Ships that had approached in neat order scattered in seemingly random directions. The swarm hesitated, their perfect coordination disrupted as they tried to track multiple targets moving in unpredictable patterns. That moment of confusion, was all the humans needed. Fire, O said quietly. The space around Nemtar lit up with weapons fire, but instead of the energy beams favored by most civilizations, the human ships unleashed kinetic projectiles accelerated to significant fractions of light speed, tungsten penetrators designed to punch through any known armor. The swarm bioships reeled under the impact. Their adaptive armor couldn't adjust quickly enough to projectiles moving at such velocity. Hulls ruptured, spraying biomechanical fluid into the vacuum. Direct hits on targets 2 and 7, Taemin reported with satisfaction. Moderate damage to target 4, but the swarm was already adapting. The surviving ships began shifting their armor, developing denser layers around impact points. Their weapons turned toward the human vessels with deadly intent. Incoming fire, the tactical officer warned. Bioenergy beams lanced out from the swarm ships. The humans didn't try to dodge. Instead, they angled their ships to present the thickest armor, accepting hits that would have crippled most vessels. Hull breach on Deck 7, damage control reported. Sealing compartments, O nodded calmly. Around her, the crew continued their work as if they weren't being shot at by nightmare creatures from the galactic rim. Distance to nearest target? She asked. 8,000 kilometers in closing. Signal the Marines. Prepare for boarding action. The communications officer looked up in shock. Ma'am, did you say boarding action? You heard correctly, Lieutenant. On the Confederation command ship, Commander Bay watched the human tactics with growing disbelief. The Earth ships weren't just fighting the swarm, they were hunting them, moving in close where the bioship's adaptive advantages meant nothing. They're going to board those things, his tactical officer said in amazement. They're actually going to board living ships full of acid and nightmare creatures. That's impossible, someone whispered. Nothing can survive inside a swarm vessel. They watched as human assault pods launched from the advancing cruisers, small craft packed with Marines in powered armor, heading directly for the ruptures in the bioship's hulls. Sergeant Choi Minho felt the assault pod slam into the swarm vessel's hull with bone-jarring force. Around him, his squad checked their weapons one final time. Outside the pod, cutting torches burned through biomechanical armor. Remember, he told his Marines, these things adapt to damage, so don't give them time to adapt. Hit fast, hit hard, and keep moving. The hull breach opened, revealing the interior of the swarm ship. Organic corridors pulsed with alien life. The air itself seemed hostile, thick with chemical compounds that would have killed most galactic species. The Marines charged in anyway. Contact front. Corporal Jung Hyejin called out as swarm soldiers emerged from the walls. 3-meter nightmares of living metal and evolved flesh moving with inhuman speed. The Marines opened fire with weapons designed on a world where everything was dangerous. Explosive rounds that detonated inside the creatures' bodies. Plasma jets that burned through their adaptive armor. Close-quarters combat techniques perfected against Earth's apex predators. The swarm soldiers fell back in confusion. These weren't the civilized beings they had learned to hunt. These were something else entirely. Something that fought like them. Corridor secure, Minho reported as his squad advanced deeper into the ship, moving toward the control center. Behind them, more assault pods attached to the swarm vessel. The humans weren't just boarding one ship. They were boarding all of them. On the Confederation bridge, Commander Bay stared at the tactical display in stunned silence. The human Marines were inside the bioships, fighting creatures that had consumed entire civilizations. And they were winning. Sir, his communications officer said quietly, the human admiral is requesting our assistance. What kind of assistance? He wants us to help with prisoner transport, Bay blinked. Prisoners? The humans have apparently captured several swarm command forms. They want to study them. As if to prove the point, one of the bioships on the display suddenly went dark. Its biomechanical systems shut down as human control signals replaced the swarm's neural network. They captured an entire ship, someone whispered. The battle was ending. 3 swarm vessels destroyed, 2 captured, the rest fleeing toward the galactic rim. The refugee fleet was safe. The humans had done in 30 minutes what the galaxy's greatest military powers couldn't accomplish in months. Commander Bay, came Admiral Lee's voice over the communication system. Your people are safe. We'll escort them to the nearest Confederation base. Admiral, Bay replied slowly. How did you do that? Do what? The swarm adapts to any weapon used against it. They learn from every engagement. How did you defeat them so easily? There was a pause. Then Admiral Lee chuckled, a sound that made several Confederation officers step back from their speakers. Lieutenant Colonel Shin Yu-jin floated in her stealth reconnaissance pod, watching the swarm staging area through passive sensors. 36 bioships clustered around a dead star system, feeding on the remains of worlds they had consumed. This was exactly what Earth's military had been looking for. Target confirmed, she whispered into her communicator. Swarm logistics base at Grid 77 Alpha. Count 36 capital vessels, estimated 200 escort forms. Copy, that Recon 7, came Admiral Lee's voice from the command ship. Maintain observation. Strike force is 30 minutes out. Yu-jin adjusted her pod's position, staying hidden in the debris field of what had once been a thriving system. The swarm ships moved with organic grace, their hulls pulsing as they processed the matter of destroyed worlds into new biomechanical forms. 3 months ago, the galaxy had watched these creatures with helpless terror. Now they were being hunted by beings who treated galactic extinction events as target practice. The change had started after the first human victory at Nemtar. Word spread through Confederation space that the Deathworlders had not just defeated the swarm, but captured their vessels. More importantly, they had done something no other species had attempted. They studied their prisoners. Dr. Kang Yun-soo stood in the bio-containment lab aboard the research vessel Sejong, examining a swarm soldier through reinforced barriers. The creature hung suspended in a stasis field, its biomechanical form frozen mid-adaptation. Fascinating, she murmured, making notes on her datapad. The neural integration points are completely different from anything in our databases. They're not individuals at all, more like mobile organs of a larger organism. Her assistant, Dr. Park Min-jung, monitored the containment systems nervously. Are you sure this is safe? The thing keeps trying to adapt even in stasis. That's what makes it interesting, Yun-soo replied. Look at these cellular structures. They're designed for rapid evolution, but only within preset parameters. The swarm can adapt to known threats quickly, but they're terrible at handling completely new situations, such as fighting an enemy that doesn't behave like prey. The research had revealed something crucial about the swarm's nature. They were perfect predators, evolved to hunt and consume civilizations that followed predictable patterns. Their entire biology was optimized for overwhelming peaceful species, who would retreat, negotiate, or fight defensive actions. But humanity did none of those things. Admiral, Yu-jin reported from her observation post, the swarm ships are beginning to disperse. It looks like they're preparing to split into hunting groups. Acknowledged. All strike units, move to intercept positions. Remember, we're not here to fight fair. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace in 3 separate groups, surrounding the swarm staging area. This wasn't the careful approach favored by civilized warfare. This was a predator pack isolating prey. Captain Yu Jae-hyuk commanded the heavy cruiser Busan, leading the attack on the swarm's left flank. Around him, his crew prepared for another boarding action with the casual efficiency that terrified alien observers. All Marines to assault positions, he ordered. Remember what the scientists told us. These things think in terms of hive coordination. Disrupt their command links and they become confused. The swarm ships tried to form a defensive pattern, but the humans had learned their tactics over dozens of engagements. Every bioship movement was predicted, every adaptation countered before it could complete. Fire Mission Alpha, Jae-hyuk commanded. The human weapons had evolved too. Where they once used simple kinetic projectiles, they now employed adaptive munitions designed specifically for swarm biology. Rounds that released electromagnetic pulses to disrupt neural networks. Penetrators filled with corrosive compounds that prevented biomechanical healing. The swarm reeled under the assault, their perfect adaptation protocols failing against weapons, designed by beings who adapted faster than they did. Sergeant Major Lim Dong-hyun led his squad through the corridors of a captured bioship, hunting for the vessel's command center. The interior walls pulsed with alien life, trying to seal breaches and trap the human invaders. Motion ahead, reported Corporal Nam Ji-woo, raising her rifle. Multiple contacts. Swarm defenders emerged from the walls like living nightmares. But where once they had faced confused and terrified prey, now they encountered predators who had been studying them for months. Targeting neural clusters, Dong Hyun called out his squad, opening fire with precise shots. Remember, 3 rounds center mass, then move. Don't give them time to adapt. The swarm soldiers fell under the coordinated assault. Their adaptive biology couldn't keep up with tactics that had been specifically developed to counter their abilities. Command center secured, Dong Hyun reported. Beginning data extraction. This was the new pattern of human warfare against the swarm. Not just defeating them, but learning from every engagement. Every captured ship provided more intelligence. Every prisoner revealed new weaknesses. Commander An So-young monitored the fleet-wide communications from her intelligence vessel. Data streams flowed in from every human ship as they systematically dismantled the swarm staging area. Pattern recognition complete, she reported to Admiral Lee. The enemy is following Retreat Protocol 7. Estimate they'll attempt to regroup at Grid 44 Delta. Understood. Signal the pursuit squadrons. Don't let any of them escape. This was what terrified the galaxy about humanity's war against the swarm. They weren't just fighting defensively, they were hunting, tracking swarm movements across multiple star systems, predicting their tactics, following them back to their breeding grounds. The bioships that managed to escape the staging area found human vessels already waiting at their rally points. Strike forces that had learned to think like the swarm, but faster and more creatively. Major General Kim Tae-min stood in the tactical center of the command ship, watching displays that showed swarm positions across 17 sectors. Red markers, that had once spread like an infection, now retreated steadily toward the galactic rim. Sir, we're receiving reports from the outer system patrols, his aide reported. 3 more swarm fleets detected attempting to establish new staging areas. Response? Admiral O's task force is moving to intercept. Estimated engagement in 6 hours. Kim nodded, studying the patterns. The swarm was being pushed back, but they were also learning. Their recent attacks showed more caution, more attempts at stealth. They were beginning to understand that they were no longer the hunters. Send word to Earth Command, he ordered. Request deployment of the new hunter-killer squadrons. If the swarm wants to play hide-and-seek, we'll show them how it's done. In deep space, Captain Song Hee-young commanded one of the new stealth frigates designed specifically for hunting bioships. Her vessel looked nothing like traditional human warships. It was sleek, organic-looking, designed to mimic swarm signatures until it was too late. Contact bearing 037, her sensor operator reported quietly. Single bioship. Appears to be scouting. Perfect, Song replied. Signal the pack. We have prey. 6 human ships emerged from stealth around the isolated swarm vessel. The bioship tried to flee, but escape routes had already been cut off. It attempted to signal for help, but human jammers blocked its communications. All units commence attack, Song ordered. Remember, we want this one intact. The scientists have questions about their breeding cycles. The swarm scout was captured within minutes, its crew stunned by weapons designed to incapacitate rather than kill. Another specimen for Earth's growing database of enemy biology. Back at the staging area, Lieutenant Colonel Yu Jin watched the final swarm ships retreat into hyperspace. What had once been a major enemy base was now empty space filled with human salvage teams. This is Recon 7, she reported. Area secure, beginning recovery operations. Copy that, came Admiral Lee's response. Good work. Return to base and prep for the next mission. Yujin powered up her pod and turned toward the human fleet. Below her, the dead system held only the wreckage of bioships and the debris of worlds consumed months ago. But something had changed in the galaxy's balance of power. The swarm was still dangerous. They still consumed worlds and killed billions. But now they did so while looking over their shoulders, knowing that somewhere in the darkness Earth's Deathworlders were hunting them. The galaxy's greatest predators had become prey, and they were beginning to realize that in the food chain of survival, humanity had claimed the top spot. The swarm overmind had existed for 7 million years. It had consumed 3 galaxies and thousands of civilizations. It had never known defeat, had never felt fear, had never questioned its purpose of endless consumption. Until now. Deep in the biomechanical core of the primary hive ship, neural pathways sparked with something unprecedented: uncertainty. The collective intelligence that guided trillions of bioforms across hundreds of star systems was experiencing emotions it had no context for understanding. The humans had to be stopped. Admiral Lee Hyunwoo stood in the war room beneath Seoul, studying intelligence reports that would have seemed impossible 6 months ago. The red markers showing swarm positions were retreating steadily toward the galactic rim. More importantly, they were retreating faster than human forces were advancing. Confirmed withdrawal from the Kepler sector, reported Commander An So-young. Long-range scouts indicate the swarm is abandoning 3 major staging areas without making contact. They're running, General Kim Tae-min said with satisfaction. For the first time in their existence, they're actually running. Lee nodded, but his expression remained serious. A retreating enemy could be more dangerous than an advancing one, especially when that enemy had the ability to adapt and learn. "What's the status on the deep space pursuit operations?" he asked. "Admiral O's task force is tracking a major swarm fleet toward the outer spiral arm," An replied. "Estimate contact in 18 hours. Captain Song's hunter-killer squadrons have identified 17 smaller groups attempting to establish hidden bases." "And our intelligence gathering?" Dr. Kang Yoon-soo's voice came through the communication link from the research vessel. "We've completed analysis of the neural samples from the latest captures. The results are disturbing." "Explain." "The swarm overmind is exhibiting signs of psychological trauma. The neural patterns we're seeing indicate a collective intelligence that's experiencing something like terror for the first time." Around the war room, officers exchanged glances. The idea of the galaxy's most feared predator being frightened would have been laughable 6 months ago. "How is that possible?" asked Kim. "The swarm evolved as perfect predators," Yoon-soo explained. "They've spent millions of years consuming civilizations that behaved predictably. Species that would retreat, negotiate, or fight defensive wars. We're the first enemy they've encountered that hunts them back. And that's causing psychological damage. Imagine a shark that suddenly discovers it's being hunted by something faster, smarter, and more aggressive. The swarm's entire identity is built around being the apex predator. We've shattered that identity," Captain Yoo Jae-hyuk interrupted from his command ship. "Admiral, we're receiving priority transmissions from multiple sectors. The swarm is abandoning established positions across the galaxy." Lee walked to the main display, watching red markers wink out as enemy forces retreated from systems they had held for months. This wasn't tactical withdrawal. This was panic. "Send word to all pursuit squadrons," he ordered. "Maintain pressure, but don't overextend. A cornered animal is most dangerous when it has nowhere left to run." The human pursuit of the swarm had become systematic and relentless, where other species had fought defensive actions. Humanity had turned the war into a hunting expedition. Every swarm ship was tracked. Every base was located and destroyed. Every escape route was cut off. Lieutenant Colonel Shin Yu-jin led one of the deep space reconnaissance missions, following swarm fleets into the empty regions beyond the galactic spiral. Her stealth ships shadowed biomechanical vessels that moved with obvious desperation. "This is Recon 7, she reported. "Target fleet is maintaining course toward the galactic void. No deviation for 12 hours. Any indication they know they're being followed?" asked Admiral Lee. "Negative, sir. But their formation patterns suggest extreme stress. They're not following normal swarm protocols." The bioships fled through empty space like animals running from a forest fire. Their usual graceful coordination had devolved into a desperate scramble to escape human pursuit. Major General Kim Tae-min monitored the galactic situation from his command center. Displays showed human forces spread across 2 spiral arms, systematically clearing swarm presence from every system. "Status report," he ordered. "Sector 7, clear. Sector 12, 2 minor swarm groups retreating toward the rim. Sector 15, Admiral O's task force has engaged a major enemy formation. Results? Total victory, sir. The swarm fleet attempted to flee before engagement. Our forces captured 3 command ships and eliminated the rest." Kim studied the tactical display. The pattern was becoming clear. The swarm was no longer fighting. They were running, and not just from immediate threats. They were abandoning entire regions of space at the first sign of human presence. "Send orders to all sector commanders," he said. "Increase patrol frequency. I want every star system checked for swarm presence. If they're trying to hide, we'll find them." Dr. Park Min-jung analyzed the latest batch of captured swarm neural tissue in the biocontainment lab. The readings were unlike anything in their databases. The stress patterns are off the charts, she reported to Dr. Yunsu. These creatures are experiencing the biological equivalent of a complete nervous breakdown. Show me the collective communication patterns. Min Jung brought up the neural network analysis. Here, instead of the normal coordinated decision-making, we're seeing fragmented thought processes, fear responses, panic markers. The overmind is losing control of its own collective, Yunsu realized. The individual bioforms are beginning to act independently. Is that why their coordination has collapsed? Partly, but there's something else. Yunsu highlighted specific neural pathways. These patterns suggest the overmind is actively trying to forget its encounters with human forces. Forget? It's attempting to delete memories of our tactics, our capabilities, our very existence. The trauma of being hunted is so severe that it's damaging the collective's ability to process information. The implications were staggering. The galaxy's most successful predator was suffering psychological damage from contact with humanity. Captain Song, He Young commanded her hunter-killer squadron as they tracked a small swarm group through the asteroid fields of a dead system. The bioships moved erratically, their formations betraying the panic of their crews. Target is attempting to hide in the asteroid field, her sensor operator reported. Passive scans only. They don't seem to know we're here. Of course they don't, Song replied. Maintain stealth approach. Signal the pack. Her squadron closed in on the hiding swarm ships like wolves surrounding wounded prey. The biovessels huddled among the asteroids, their once proud forms reduced to cowering refugees. All units, Song commanded, commence final approach. Remember, we want at least one intact for the scientists. The engagement lasted 8 minutes. The swarm ships barely fought back, their crews too demoralized to mount effective resistance. When it was over, human boarding teams found bioforms that seemed to have given up entirely. Admiral Lee received the after-action reports in his command center. Another successful hunt. Another group of swarm vessels eliminated or captured. The pattern continued across dozens of star systems. Sir, Commander An reported, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Confederation. Put it through. Ambassador Kang Dae-ho's image appeared on the main screen. The alien looked stunned, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was about to say. Admiral Lee, he began slowly. Our long-range sensors have detected something unprecedented. The main swarm fleets are retreating beyond the galactic rim. They're leaving our galaxy entirely. Lee felt a moment of satisfaction, but it was tempered by caution. Confirmed withdrawal? Multiple independent sources confirm it. The swarm is abandoning all positions in Confederation space. They're fleeing toward intergalactic void. Around the war room, Earth's military leaders absorbed this information. The enemy that had consumed civilizations for millions of years was running away from a species that had achieved spaceflight only centuries ago. What's our pursuit status? Lee asked his staff. Standing by for orders, sir, replied Admiral O. Do we follow them into the void? Lee considered the question. They could pursue the swarm beyond the galaxy, hunt them through empty space until every last bioship was destroyed. It would be a complete victory, total extermination of a galactic threat. But it would also mean keeping humanity's military focused on an enemy that was already defeated. Resources that could be used for rebuilding, for helping the Confederation recover, for exploring the galaxy that was finally safe. Negative, he decided. Establish patrol squadrons along the galactic rim. If any swarm forces attempt to return, we'll be waiting. But the main threat is over. Dr. Kang Yun-soo provided the final piece of the puzzle in her comprehensive report to Earth Command. Analysis of the latest neural samples confirms our assessment. The swarm overmind has suffered complete psychological collapse. The collective intelligence that guided their expansion for millions of years has essentially had a nervous breakdown. Meaning? Asked Lee. Even if individual bioforms survive in the intergalactic void, they'll never again function as a coordinated threat. The overmind's fear of humanity has become so severe that it's chosen exile over any possibility of future contact.